Alrighty then, here we go. A little Ace Ventura for you. Sorry. If you have headphones, you should pause it and put them on now. Otherwise, it will sound like I'm talking to you through a tin can. This video series is designed to not only educate, but also wake people up, and this requires your full and undivided attention without distraction. Make no mistake about it, a day of cosmic reckoning is on humanity's horizon. This is not a theory or an opinion. History has proven this to be true over and over. Cosmic reckoning, a little definition, okay? A profound, large-scale settling of accounts. A moment where humanity must face the consequences of its actions. A moment where human actions are judged against a higher cosmic standard of justice or harmony. It's exactly what is going to happen. Yeah, maybe it's a little screwed up to laugh, but you know what? Whatever. All right, I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible and straight to the point, but there are a lot of important points that need to be made. All right, here we go. What is history but the story of how civilizations have degenerated and collapsed after attaining what were then the pinnacles of power and prosperity? Okay, think about this in great depth. What is history but the story of how civilizations have degenerated and collapsed after attaining what were then the pinnacles of power and prosperity? Okay. I'm saying this for a million reasons. Are you absorbing what I'm putting down? I'm talking about what is going on today. You understand? Okay. Now, the world used to consist of many separate and small civilizations that rose and fell at different times. Unlike in history, the world today is one big civilization. But regardless of its size, our current civilization can and will fall, just as every previous civilization has. I spent all of 5 seconds creating this visual. By the way, just saying. But keep in mind that the lines do not holy shit, I can't talk. The lines do not represent any historical accuracy in terms of the angle of the slope or the rise and the fall. Okay, it's just a simple visual. It also doesn't reflect the historical timing of the rise and fall of previous civilizations. Okay, sorry, I'm not trying to waste any time, but I just had to say this as a disclaimer. Anyway, this is a very basic visual analogy. Okay, on a forward timeline, starting long ago, civilizations rose and fell at different times, which is represented on the left side of the screen, obviously. And then just behind Marvin there is where our current worldwide civilization began to rise, right? And before I switch to the next slide, here's a little something to think about. Do you know what redundancy means? Right? And I mean in terms of like engineering. Okay. What I'm trying to say is, in terms of the human species and survival, when the world consists of many smaller civilizations in comparison to one big worldwide civilization, that like the one that exists today, you know what I'm getting at here? Our current worldwide civilization is analogous to putting all of your eggs in one basket, right? And think about in terms of the survival of a species and what you know what I'm saying. Anyway, on a side note, our so-called leaders, the powers that shouldn't be, okay, they don't like to admit this, but every country depends on multiple other countries for a wide variety of things. And the truth is that if one major country collapses, it will drag down multiple other countries with it. Right? You could picture it like each and every country in the world being like a boat, and each country is tethered or chained to multiple other countries. Right? And this isn't worth rambling about, but it's important to understand that the countries of the world are all connected, and each country depends on multiple other countries to stay afloat. And I say this all the time, but the entire world is in a death spiral, and most people don't even realize it. Right? This visual actually serves multiple purposes at the moment. Okay. This is another very simple visual that I spent all of 5 seconds creating. Right? As simple as this is, okay, the truth is that most people have never even thought about or looked at civilization this way before. Okay, I color-coded the 3 stages of civilization. Okay, green being the rise of civilization. Okay, this is the first stage of civilization. You can think of it as laying or pouring or building the foundation of civilization. In the first stage, civilization is open and on the rise. They're united and working together to build something great. Okay, now let's go back to the visual. The yellow or orange in this case. Sorry, yellow was just too light of a color to show up on white paper, but you get the idea here, okay? There is a common misconception and or misunderstanding that most people have about this second phase. And I'll get back to this in a minute, okay? The second phase of civilization being bureaucratic. The second phase is analogous to when the foundations have hardened and civilization has built its house on top, right? Meaning the foundation is solid and civilization has attained power and prosperity. Okay, picture a big beautiful home built on top of this foundation, or even picture a golden palace or something, right? It doesn't matter exactly what you picture on top of these foundations, as long as you picture something, right? The point being that civilization is no longer on the rise. Okay, civilization is no longer growing. Okay, the Golden Palace is complete. Right? You understand what's going on here, right? I know this sounds a little off topic, but it's not, okay? Do you remember one of the famous quotes from Bane in the Batman movie? He says to Batman, "Victory has defeated you." Okay, this is another near perfect analogy to the second stage of civilization. A great example of this is Rome, okay? Rome had wealth, power, and centuries of dominance, but it also had complacency. As prosperity increased, discipline declined. As military power grew, moral restraint weakened. The very values that had built Rome, like hard work, family, sacrifice, and civic duty, were gradually eroded by decadence, dependency, and short-term thinking. I know I'm kind of talking fast and going through a lot of stuff, somewhat quickly. I don't want to blow by this stuff. You try to absorb it. Okay, as Bane said to Batman, "Victory has defeated you." Okay, and I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible, but there is much more that could be said about this. Okay. Just to keep it simple in your mind, okay, you could think of it as building up a powerful empire or civilization, and everything is great. But all of the values that built this powerful empire or civilization are gradually eroding, like all throughout this second stage or phase of civilization, right? But people don't see it. Like, that's the whole thing, right? And I'm saying this for multiple reasons. I'm not trying to get ahead of myself, but this is one of the reasons that people never see the collapse coming. As they say, well, it takes, generations and, decades and centuries for, a civilization to collapse. Well, that is true, but not entirely. Because the second that it stops growing and being on the rise, as soon as it exits the first stage into the second stage, the erosion begins. And you'll understand this more in a few minutes, okay? But, I'm saying all of this for multiple reasons, and one of them is being that this erosion of values, and the complacency and the decadence and the dependency and the short-term thinking, like this applies to our worldwide civilization, and this erosion began a very long time ago. All right, you understand what I'm saying here? Like, you have to think of it as where we are today on the timeline, right? In comparison, because you have to understand the history and what's happening, what happened in history, what's happening today, in order to understand what's going to happen in the near future, right? You can't understand where you're going if you don't understand where you came from and where you are now, right? So the erosion is a slow and gradual process that no one notices until it's already too late. Okay, this is very important because people don't notice it. They don't know the signs. They don't know what to look for. And when you notice it, it's too late. And that's exactly what is happening. When people are beginning to notice that there are very serious problems, right? It's already too late. Well, I mean, not that there's anything that can really be done about it. Anyway, moving on. Let's go back to this visual right here, okay? The common misconception or misunderstanding that most people have is that they don't recognize the second stage as being decline, right? Most people incorrectly think that decline is indicated by some kind of, like some kind of massive failure or even just represented by a downward slope. Okay, what I mean is simplex here, okay? People think that, everything is great during this second phase of civilization. And it is, but you have to be able to picture what I'm saying here is that civilization is well established and has attained power and prosperity, but this leads to the erosion of its very foundation. Okay? Now, you're going to understand this better as I go through this, okay? But before I go any further, and before I forget, now is a good time to mention Tytler's cycle, which is just one of the many great perspectives of a cycle that occurs within civilization over the course of time. Right, now, take a screenshot of this if you want, but I'm not going to talk about this in great depth, but you just have to, absorb this, okay? Now, this here alone, it takes many generations to happen, like to complete a full cycle, And most people, they don't think outside of their own lifetime, so they don't normally realize which part of the cycle that they're in, or that there is even a cycle at all. Do you know what I'm saying? Because, the average history class doesn't teach you this kind of stuff. It doesn't teach anybody this kind of stuff. The average history class tends to, you know what, I'm not going to go down that road, okay? Wasting time. And there is nothing more invaluable than time, okay? Right now, this is a very basic visual of the progression on a forward timeline. Each phase being a byproduct of the previous. right? You see how it's color coded there? They're each slightly different, and each arrow leads into the next one. Like each phase is a byproduct of the previous. Okay, it's very important that you understand this. Okay, the cyclical nature of the rise and fall of civilization is no different. Like the three simplified phases that I'm talking about, that they feed into each other in the same way that each phase in Tytler's cycle feeds into the next. Okay, each phase is a byproduct of the previous. Okay, pause it. Take a screenshot if you want to look at this better. Especially before I change slides. But oh, guess where we are in this specific cycle? I'll give you a hint. We're getting very close to the end. Right? See, before I switch slides, okay, just look at it. Abundance leads to selfishness. Selfishness leads to complacency, and so on and so on. Right? You see how this? Each phase is a byproduct of the previous, and it's a natural progression of just how things work. Right? Like that's there's all. I'm not going to go into it. Okay, we are currently near the end of this cycle. Okay, dependency leads to bondage, which means the government becomes your daddy. Oh boy, I cracked myself up. Kind of making a joke there because most people picture something else when they hear the word bondage. Anyway, then after the cycle completes, it starts over, and this is when people unite once again, to overthrow the powers that shouldn't be. Okay, the first phase being faith in building a new and better life for everyone. It's not the religious type of faith. Okay, like faith in building a new and better life. Okay. All right. Take a screenshot of this and try to absorb what it's actually all about. During the first phase, the people are united and working together to build something great. And the authority operates on the consent of the people. Right? And then during the second phase, okay, civilization becomes bureaucratic and the people are no longer united. And this also goes hand in hand with Tytler's cycle. Right? Do you understand? Like abundance leads to selfishness and complacency, right? You see how it just flows. So the people are no longer united as one during the second stage of civilization because of just a natural progression. Like this is just how things work. Do you know what I'm saying? Kind of like water flowing down a hill. Like it can only go one way. Right? And then, so I was saying the people are no longer united as one in this second stage, and civilization is now focused on stability instead of unity. Right? The authority no longer operates on the consent of the people, but instead the authority is all about deception and tricking the people in every way. I could kind of ramble about this because we already went through this phase. Like we have lived this phase. You understand? Like the level of deception and the level of trickery, it is a byproduct of the previous phase. Okay, this is how we got to this point, right? This is just how it works because things change on a forward timeline. There's more to this, but this is the simplified and bulletproof version of it. Okay. Then there is the third and final phase of civilization. When civilization becomes authoritarian, okay, which in case you haven't noticed, has already begun and is quickly spreading across the entire world. Right? Think about what I'm saying. You want proof where we are on the timeline, just look at the world. right? Authoritarianism is not the goal of the powers that be. It's actually a byproduct of the previous phase. Okay? And the average person will never take the time to truly understand this. I'm saying this for multiple reasons, but unlike the two prior phases, okay, like the first being consent, the second being deception, and in the third phase, the authority uses coercion, right? And if you look at the bottom right, survival is what it's all about. It's basically every man and woman for themselves, every business for themselves, every elite for themselves. The powers that be, it's all about survival for everybody in every way. It's screw everybody else. I'm going to get whatever I can while I can. Screw everybody else. Okay, that's the third phase, and that's what you can see as we are transitioning into the third phase here. Right? Before I switch slides, just keep them, just keep this visual in the back of your mind as we continue and compile it with the previous things that I've showed you, right? The third final phase of civilization is the erosion of the very foundation of civilization. It began long ago, right? The foundation itself has cracks all throughout it, and the crisis or crises is now visible, unlike during the second phase being decline, right? So when we were in decline in the second phase, it wasn't noticeable. You know what I'm saying? And we were all born, on top of this crappy foundation, right? People don't think anything of it. Like, that was there when I was born. Hasn't changed. We're good, right? But no, we're not, right? The very foundation that holds up this entire house of cards has been eroding away from underneath us for decades and decades and decades, generations and generations and generations, right? It doesn't become noticeable until it's too late, right? And again, I say this, okay? Authoritarianism is a byproduct of the previous phase. It is not the goal of the powers that shouldn't be, contrary to what most people incorrectly think. You know what I'm saying here? Like, there is a lot of quote-unquote truth seekers and conspiracy theorists out there who are screaming at the top of their lungs that all of this is like part of a plan. And don't get me wrong, okay? Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of plans going on right now. There are plenty of agendas going on right now. Okay? That's not what I'm saying. It's just that you have to understand that there are phases of civilization, and authoritarianism is a byproduct of the previous phase. Okay? Now let's go back to the this visual for a second. It is very important that you understand this. Okay, most people, they incorrectly think that it takes decades or centuries for a civilization to collapse, which is partially true, but it begins long ago. Okay, so in reality, history has proven that civilization collapses very shortly after entering the third and final stage. Right? This is important that you understand, because there are a lot of people who think that the goal of the powers that shouldn't be, becoming, yeah, I'm stumbling on my words here, becoming like a dictatorship or authoritarian, or you get what I'm saying here? They think that the goal is this whatever, right? And that it's going to just, that the world is going to stay like that for like ever or for a very long time. That we're just all going to be like serfs and like slaves to this conspiratorial new system of some sort, right? And that I'm just trying to say that that's really not the case, because history has proven over and over and over that civilization collapses very shortly after entering the third and final stage. Okay, meaning it doesn't take decades. It happens very quickly after entering the third and final stage. And history has proven this true and to be true over and over and over. Okay. So shortly after civilization enters the third and final stage, which, keep in mind, the third and final stage is simply just the byproduct of an incredibly unstable civilization. Okay, it is not the goal of the powers that be. And this authoritarian phase only lasts a very short time before it implodes and devours itself. You understand like the importance of this? We're talking the third and final stage is a byproduct of the previous stage, but it only got to the third and final stage because of its instability, its extreme instability. Okay, civilization is incredibly unstable. This is what brings it to the third and final stage, right? History has proven over and over and over that right now, at this very moment, we are currently entering the third and final phase of civilization. And the majority of the world is absolutely clueless. Make no mistake, there is no doubt about it. Civilization is in its final death throes as we speak. In this third and final, incredibly unstable phase of civilization, what will happen in the near future is this. The perfect storm will come along, and our holy shit, I can't talk. Our incredibly unstable civilization will come crashing down. Okay, the perfect storm. Right now, this really is very, 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 very simple. Right, we have an incredibly unstable civilization, and all it takes is the perfect storm. And the perfect storm. Okay, what is the perfect storm? Right, we'll get to that in a second. Okay, to be civilized is to climb a never-ending hill that only gets steeper and steeper, faster and faster. On a forward timeline, civilization only has more and more problems that can't be fixed. Right? More and more problems, more and more complexity. So my point is that, in case you haven't noticed, there are a million serious problems in the world. And there will only continue to be more and more problems, faster and faster, more and more complex problems. Can't talk. So, like, this is analogous to climbing a hill that only gets steeper and steeper, faster and faster. And the perfect storm being when civilization has more problems than it can handle, which is analogous to the point where civilization's quote-unquote wheels begin to slip. And as you see in the visual on the left there, okay, that's the hill, and then on the right, that's civilization being the vehicle there, okay. It tumbles all the way back down to the bottom, right? Because we've been climbing this hill forever, right? Decades and decades, centuries, right? It's only getting steeper and steeper. That's how it works. It can only get steeper and steeper because there are only more and more complex problems that can't be fixed. So we're climbing this hill. Right? It's only a matter of time, and the whole point of this discussion here is to get you to realize that we are nearly vertical already. Right? We are nearing the end of the line. In a world of ever-increasing complexity and ever-increasing problems with no solution, what's most likely to create the perfect storm may not even be what most people are expecting. Right? The perfect storm might actually end up being created by something small, like the straw that broke the camel's back. Right? And what I mean by this is simplex, and I don't want to be misunderstood, but an incredibly unstable civilization with a million problems that can't be fixed, right? It doesn't take something like World War III or nukes flying to actually create the perfect storm that collapses a civilization, which is how a lot of people imagine it going down, right? Because that's what a lot of people are talking about right now. It's like, wait till World War III starts and nukes start flying, and then it's the end of the world, right? Well, okay, that could actually happen, right? And I'm not sure what percent or what probability that is, but hear me out. Like, hear what I'm saying. The straw that broke the camel's back is all that it requires. And too many problems, right? When you have too many fucking problems, right? You get one more. It's just too much. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's all it takes to create the perfect storm. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is just how things, like, this is the most logical and rational perspective of this, is that it doesn't even take a large event to topple civilization because it's already incredibly unstable. Right? It's like pushing over. It's like pushing over. You know what? I gotta be careful what I say. I don't want to offend anybody. Right. Anyway, the perfect storm can be created just as easily as putting too much weight on a ship. Right. Think about it, right? The ship can only hold. Excuse me. A ship can only hold so much weight. Right, and it's fine. Right up until you put that last container on, that was just too much. Like the straw breaking the camel's back. Right? All it takes is one too many problems. Or in this case, one too many containers on a ship. It's all it takes to sink the entire ship, right? It might be able to hold 1,000,000 containers. But one too many is all it takes. And that's the same most logical and rational way to look at this vector of collapse is kind of what I'm saying. Is the reason that I'm saying this is because there are so many people out there who are excessively extreme. They'll sit there and they'll tell you that the currency is going to collapse tomorrow, and or you know what I'm saying? Like, well, you know what? That could happen because there is not one currency in all of history that hasn't collapsed, because no currency lasts forever. But what's most realistic, what's most logical and rational is that it will be more like a straw that broke the camel's back. Not some major event. It doesn't have to be, is my point, is that it doesn't have to be a major event. But a major event most certainly could obviously be that straw. Do you know what I'm saying? Even though it's much larger than a straw. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what? Anyway, it's just like everything is fine, right? Civilization, like, is analogous to the ship, is just floating along just fine while carrying 1,000,000 problems. But like I said, all it takes is one more container or one more problem, like one too many, or just the right kind of problem, right? The same thing goes like for an airplane, right? It can carry X amount of pounds and still fly no problem, right? But if you put, one too many heavy containers on it, it will fall out of the sky. Not that that's how it actually works, but you know, Probably wouldn't be able to leave the ground if it had too many containers in it to begin with. But you understand the analogy is that the tipping of the scale, right? The same reason that the boat sank. All it took was one extra container, one problem too many, right? The straw that broke the camel's back. Okay. A day of cosmic reckoning is on humanity's horizon, and this is not a theory or an opinion. Okay. And when you understand history, you then understand where we are in the cycle. Okay. When civilization collapses this time, it will be like no other time in history, mainly because 99% of the population's life depends on all of these fragile systems that will all come crashing down, right? You think about what I'm saying. Everyone's lives depend on all of these fragile systems. When the perfect storm comes along and civilization comes toppling down and all these fragile systems go down with it, people are just going to be left with nothing and no way to sustain themselves. You know what I'm saying here? It is going to be. In the past, I've called this sort of thing humanity's self-created near-extinction level event. But today, I'm calling it the Day of Cosmic Reckoning. They both have a nice ring to it, don't they? So this is just one of the many vectors of collapse, by the way. Okay, I consider it the main vector, like the first and foremost, the vector of 100% certainty. Okay, civilization has run its course, and what I discussed in this video will, without a doubt, happen in the near future. History has proven this true over and over and over. And when you understand this, you then also truly understand everything that we observe happening in the world today. Everything in life is all about having the correct perspective, which comes from knowledge and wisdom, right? When you are wearing the correct lenses, everything that you observe is perfectly clear. Think about what I'm saying. When you are wearing the correct lenses, everything that you observe is perfectly clear. You see, there's a lot of reasons I'm saying this, but most people, they don't have the time to learn anything, and nor do they have the desire to learn anything, and they don't have the time to observe the world. They don't see the bigger picture. They're just too busy, running on the hamster wheel, going to work, taking care of their children, taking, the garbage out, making dinner. And they just want to relax on the couch for a while before they go to bed, right? That's pretty much what most people do. They don't care about really anything else outside of that, right? You have to understand, how important what I'm saying is, that this day of cosmic reckoning is going to come like a thief in the night. People are just not going to see it coming. They really aren't. And this series is kind of about raising awareness and, I'm planning on making a series of short videos on the many vectors of humanity's soon-coming cosmic reckoning, and each video in the series being focused on just one vector. Do you understand? The idea being that each video will be short enough that the average person is willing, and able to watch it, because it's not too long, not too much to absorb. They can sit down and really just absorb it, right? Unlike making, a 2-hour episode that this might actually take, I'm getting here. Anyway, and with the goal being, to educate people, because most people are either absolutely clueless or they foolishly think that this type of stuff only happens in the movies or in the distant future. Right? But the truth is that civilization is already incredibly unstable and is already juggling more problems than it knows what to do with. So it won't take much more to create the perfect storm that causes civilization to implode and devour itself. Okay? There's a lot of little things that I could say about this, and I'm avoiding that because I'm trying to keep this very simple in everyone's mind. Like whoever views this, I'm just trying to keep it very simple. Like the stages of civilization and the perfect storm, right? Because once you reach this level of extreme instability, I mean, a strong breeze could blow the place down. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, where, as in previous phases, they had stability, right? Not so much in the first phase, it was on the rise, and, the foundation was still wet. But once it hardened, right, in the second phase, this is where the stability comes in, and this is also where you can pick it up right from Tudlar's cycle. You can see it in the, like if you were to take Tudlar's cycle and break it down into thirds and overlap it with these 3 stages of civilization, right? Like cycle within a cycle, cycles within cycles, right? What you could do is you could break Tudlar's cycle into thirds and look at it that way. Like the first phase is when people start with faith, right? And they're building something together. They're building a better life together, blah, 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 right? And then a third of the way in, this is where it transitions into the second stage, where it becomes about, complacency, selfishness, right? And you know how that order that I'm not looking at it right now. I'm just saying, like, think about what I'm saying. The third stage, we're entering the third stage, which is a very clear indicator that civilization is already in its death throes and incredibly unstable, because we wouldn't be here in the first place if it wasn't for the instability. Do you understand? It's kind of like a car being in a ditch, right? Like it wouldn't have got to the ditch in the first place if it was stable and on the road, right? But instead, the wheels are like wobbling, right? The wheels are unstable. The whole vehicle is like falling apart. And then it, loses control, goes off the road, and crashes into a ditch, right? And you don't get from one place to the other for no reason, right? And when you're in one place, like it is a very clear indicator. Like, hey, we went off the road, crashed into the ditch because it's an incredibly unstable car and the wheels fell off the freaking thing. You know what I mean? This is the third stage. Like, we are there. Like, we wouldn't have gotten here any other way. It's just this progression on a forward timeline. There is only, like, things can only happen a certain way, like water flowing downhill. You don't get to where we're at any other way. And once you're there, it is a very clear indicator of what happens next. Like, this is very, very simple. Like, you could teach this to a 7-year-old, right? And there's probably a good reason that they don't, but they also don't teach this to us as adults or teens whenever you learn this shit. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm going to shut up, but share this video series with anyone that you're trying to wake up, okay? And I'm not trying to grow this channel by any means. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm literally searching for intelligent life, as the channel name says. And I'm also just trying to make internet friends, if at all possible, which just never seems to happen. So if you fit the description, and and if you aren't, an antisocial zombie like everyone else, send me an email. All right. Thanks for watching.